Good morning, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Egypt, Mr. Abdel Ghaffar, Vice President of the Spanish Rectors Council and Rector of the University of Granada, Professor Pilar Aranda, President of Magna Charta Universitatum Observatorio, Professor Saibon Norda, Rector Emeritus of the New York University, Professor John Edward Sexton, and General Secretary of the Magna Charta Universitatum Observatory, Professor David Locke, rectors, colleagues, and friends. Welcome to the University of Salamanca. You have come from all over the world to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Magna Charta Universitatum and our 8th centenary. We welcome you as members of one big international corporation, that of people who believe in the improvement of human beings through knowledge. In Salamanca here, the dignity of individuals and their rights have been defended and are being defended every day. Here, the fundamentals of social science were established in the first instance of globalization. It was in Salamanca that Columbus found support for his trip to America, and there were professors from Salamanca who warned the emperors of the need to respect all human beings. Revolutions began at universities. The World Revolution first had a scientific meaning, then inspired political change in America, Europe, and all over the world, for the cause of freedom. Here were written many treatises on popular sovereignty, the limitation of absolute power, and human rights. This very university led such debates. This year we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Magna Charta Universitatum, but also the 50 years of the May protests of 1968 in France, which started at the University of Paris, as well as the Centenario of the University Reform of Córdoba, Argentina, and the 8th Centenary of the University of Salamanca. There is no progress without dissidence, without the original and innovative thinking that is born from the fountain of the eternal youth of knowledge, the university. Today, we will devote our work sessions to reflecting on and discussing our contributions to the present social demands. We will also think about the necessary adaptation of the values and principles of the Magna Charta to the current circumstances. I hope that this historic building of the University of Salamanca will inspire us all, since for centuries, the mission of the university has been pondered here with excellent results. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. And after this short welcome address, I welcome Professor Pilar Aranda, Rector of the University of Granada and Vice President of the Spanish Rector Council, in order to say some words.
Good morning, Rector Rivero, Ministry, President, Rectors, colleagues, friends. As Vice President of the Spanish Rectors Conference, it is a very great pleasure for me to say a few words of welcome on behalf of our President, Rector Roberto Fernandez, who unfortunately cannot be with us this morning. It is an honor for the Spanish university system that the Magna Charta Observatory should have chosen Spain as the site for this year's annual conference and signing ceremony. And I'm pleased to share once again the 800th anniversary celebration of the University of Salamanca, the longest standing of our universities, which means that we have also been celebrating 800 years of the university as an institution of higher learning and scholarships in Spain. Rector Rivero, Ricardo, Thank you for sharing this year of events with us all, and congratulations on again from all of us. This event has a very special significance for our university system and for universities around the world, as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the signing of the 1988 Charter, in tribute to and in defense of the essential core values of our academic institution. 41 Spanish universities have now signed the Charter of the 816 signatories this fall. The Magna Charta acts as a constant reminder of those ancient yet fully current values in difficult times and situations where they come under over or covert attack. The Observatory carries out invaluable work in the upholding of those values as we witness and suffer attacks in different forms and from different quarters. The recent case of Turkey or the Central European University in Budapest come instantly to mind, but they are far from being the only ones. And the Observatory does work to remind us all of the core values, as recent news highlights case relating to a late breach of academic integrity. The basis of our response can only be the responsible exercise of our institutional autonomy and academic freedom, carefully and closely balanced by public accountability. The Magna Charta Observatory seeks to defend, promote, and monitor the long-standing fundamental values and rights of what is probably our society's longest-standing institution, an institution which has survived by learning from its past, adapting to its present, while looking to its own society future, without abandoning its core mission and meaning. That is that we will be discussing here today and tomorrow, and the very welcome and necessary theme of university values in a changing world. Thank you again for choosing Spain in this very special year, both you and for the Spanish university system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rector Aranda. Pilar. Now may I introduce our president, Professor Seibol Norda, and thank you him again for choosing Salamanca for this encounter.
Honored guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, a warm welcome. We are very, very pleased that you have all come to Salamanca for today's meeting, 250 of us, and for tomorrow's ceremony on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Magna Charta Universitatum. Why are we here? First and for all, we are here to honor and to celebrate. We're here to honor the power and the wisdom of those who more than 30 years ago took this initiative. And I'm very pleased that two of those will be speaking at this meeting today and tomorrow, Josep Rical of Barcelona and Fabio Roverso Monaco of Bologna. So we want to honor the initiative, but we also want to celebrate. We want to celebrate 30 years of continuous tradition, subscribing to core values of the university, inviting support, inviting protection from governments and other stakeholders. At the same time, committing ourselves as universities to serve our societies well. As a clear proof of the strength of this long tradition, tomorrow 73 new signatories will join the Magna Carta community. At the same time, we must realize that continuing a strong tradition requires more than celebration and ceremony. Only by renewal, by re-energizing, speaking to changed situations, facing and living up to new challenges, we can really continue a strong tradition. A building that is not being used will not survive. It is only by use, by reuse, by innovation and modernization that strong traditions will continue. That's why the theme of this particular meeting is university values in a changing world, requiring new reflections, sometimes new answers. And it's because of this that the Magna Carta Observatory has taken 3 initiatives that will feature these meetings. First and for all, today we launch a new project called Living Values that has been designed and prepared by many over the last couple of years, has been tested by 10 universities in 9 different countries as a pilot, and is now ready to be used and practiced worldwide. It is an invitation to individual universities to look into their own value base, to develop it, to develop their community, and to strengthen their values. A second feature is that we start work this week here in Salamanca on a study of the wisdom of a Magna Charta Universitatum 2.0, a new version, a version speaking to the world of tomorrow, a new initiative, a new text, a new statement that may be using new language, that certainly will repeating the strength and the strong language of the old statement, but it will be try to address new issues at the same time. A third initiative that we will hope to start next year is a bundling of researchers researching the practice of values universities worldwide. It is by these modernizations and innovations, by these new activities, that we hope to be working to the new future, to the continuing tradition of the Magna Carta. Just one last and important thing. A fourfold thank you. First and for all, to our Salamanca friends for their readiness to have us here. Very much appreciated. Secondly, to our growing community of signatories for their help and their support, both morally and financially. Thirdly, to our many international partners and to our many volunteers for their cooperation. Without them, we could not, as an observatory, do what we try to do. And last but not least, thank you very much to the University of Bologna for its strong support. Bologna was not just the location of the birth of the Magna Charta Universitatum. The university and all its consecutive rectors have been strongly supporting and protecting it. And they therefore deserve our thank you very, very, very much. I wish us a fruitful meeting and tomorrow a great ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Norda. And then now I give the word to our Secretary, Professor Locke.
Thank you very much indeed. It is customary for the Secretary General at these anniversaries to give you a state of the observatory address, and I will be expanding on a couple of things that our President has introduced. Periodically, it is useful to look at a map, especially on an anniversary, to assess where we are, to confirm where we want to end up, and take decisions about the best way to get there. This is especially so, and we have a responsibility to do this, if we are undertaking the journey for the benefit of others, and if the terrain and the destination change over time. The observatory set its current course in April 2015. What it found then was the fundamental values set out in the Magna Charta Universitatum remain vital, but require evaluation and need to be communicated in a modern way for a more diverse range of universities. Developments in the role of the state and the entrepreneurial market economy raise a different set of issues. Further, autonomy is a journey undertaken over a period of time rather than a destination at a single point in time. Its implementation and context are different in different cultures, countries, and institutions. While founded and located in Europe, increasing globalization makes it imperative that the observatory develops a more global perspective. The observatory's chosen course to its destination to be achieved by 2020, as foreseen in 2015, included growing, becoming more global, engaging more extensively and closely with its signatories, understanding more about how values could have greater impact, providing better services, and doing so in a more modern way. I want to suggest to you that this year we are starting to see tangible evidence that real progress is being made on that journey. As the President has already mentioned, following a series of workshops in different parts of the world since 2015, the Living Values Project was prepared and this year has been piloted in 10 universities in 9 different countries, and we are delighted to have the pilot sites with us on this occasion. The guidance and toolkit is freely available on the Magna Charta Observatory's website for all universities, and specific support will be available from the MCO for institutions who would like assistance with its use. Fundamentally, the Living Values Project enables universities to identify whether their espoused values are still appropriate and comprehensive, whether they are being implemented and lived effectively, and what might be done where there are gaps between the actual and the desired situations. This afternoon, in our conference, we are going to devote the time to looking at the Living Values Project, aspects of it, and ways in which it might be used. Much more information about it is on the website, and you have a leaflet in your pack which gives you the address of that. This important piece of work will enable values to have more impact for universities. But which values? The Magna Charta Universitatum was first signed in Bologna by 388 universities in 1988. It has stood the test of time extremely well. Its core values of autonomy and academic freedom remain universal and vital. But there are other values which have emerged from the MCO's workshop, which are also necessary if universities are to continue to best serve their stakeholders in their unique situations. These include integrity, equity, fairness, creativity, innovativeness, excellence, social responsibility, community service and diversity, health, well-being, and others. They don't replace the core values, but operate alongside them to enable the mission of a university to be fulfilled. They are different in different countries and for universities which have different missions. Hence, to keep the observatory on track in its modernising and relevance journey, it's been agreed that the Magna Charta Universitatum itself will be reviewed and a new edition launched at our anniversary gathering in Bologna in September 2020. An international group has been assembled to undertake this work. It will meet for the first time on Wednesday, and it will consult widely, face-to-face and virtually. I invite and urge you to respond freely and fully so that the new document can be as good as possible and serve universities for the next 30 years as well as its predecessor has done. Concerning other evidence of progress, the observatory's target of achieving 1,000 signatories by 2020 now looks more achievable, with over 900 universities now having either signed or been approved to sign the Magna Charta Universitatum. 73 of those will do so tomorrow. That is up from 776 in 2015. We thank the University of Salamanca in advance for making such splendid arrangements for that signing ceremony. We welcome the new signatories and we look forward to a great celebration of that. Over the previous year, the observatory has delivered workshops in Kazakhstan, Ghana, Bologna and Paris, and has contributed to meetings of kindred bodies in Brussels, Berlin and the UK. It has modernised its website so that the living value materials can be used effectively. To assist with these developments, the University of Bologna has kindly provided an additional half-time member of staff to provide research and administrative support to the observatory. We welcome Dr. Erika Delan to that role, and we thank the University of Bologna. Signatories have been very generous with their donations. These are now 7 times more than they were in 2014, and they continue to rise each year. We thank you for your generosity. But as we want to continue not to have a fee for signing the Magna Carta or for belonging And as we want our online resources to be completely freely available around the world, we still need to raise more money. And I hope that you will be generous in your support when we write to you following this conference. All of this would not have been achieved without the insight and support of the members of the Magna Carta Observatory's Council, our experienced group of ambassadors, the partnerships with our kindred bodies, including particularly the International Association of Universities, the European University Continuing Education Network, and Scholars at Risk, and the involvement of our signatories. On behalf of the Council, I would like to thank all of those who have in any way supported the Magna Carta Observatory. The contribution of our administrator, Carla Pazzagalia, our research and administrative assistant, Dr. Erica Delan, and the support of the University of Bologna are particularly recognised. There is, of course, much more to do to enable us to refine and move towards our destination. We look forward to undertaking research to increase our understanding of values and how they might have greater impact for the benefit of our students, universities, and societies more globally and in the years to come. It is now my very great pleasure to introduce the first of our two keynote speakers. John Sexton served as president of New York University from 2002 through until 2015. He oversaw considerable growth in the university's reach and stature, including the establishment of a number of international campuses in different parts of the world. I want to suggest to you that of all the rectors in the world, John Sexton probably knows more or as much as about the changing expectations of society. And John, we welcome you warmly and we look forward to your address.
So it's a great honor for me to be here. It's a bit daunting to be introduced as knowing more than anyone else, and I want to immediately put that thought to rest. I will try to crystallize for you a few thoughts about the moment in which we who love the institution that we call Universitas, that we face. I think it was Clark Kerr of the University of California who first noticed an interesting fact. If you haven't heard it, I give it to you now. If you've heard it, I give it to reinvigorate you. There are 85 institutions in the world, 85, that exist formally today the way they did 500 years ago. You might do a little mental game and try to think of a few. The English Parliament would be one, the Vatican would be another. The interesting fact relevant to today is that 70 of the 85 are universities. 70 of the 85 are universities. I come from a country where 300 years is a long time. I come from an infant country. We are at, of course, a university we celebrate as being one of the first, one of the founders of this concept. Think of it, 800 years. You divide that in half, 400, you divide that in half again, 200, and NYU is about to reach our 200th anniversary. We are infants in this room. And of course, Salamanca is noted also for being the alma mater of about 2/3 of the universities that were created in the 16th and 17th century and would qualify for Clark Kerr's category. There must be something extraordinary about the concept of a university for that to be the case. We celebrate Salamanca's 800 years today. We celebrate the 30 years of Magna Charta, the tremendous affirmation of core principles that make the universities what they are. And I would submit to you that today, more than any time over the 800 years in which this university has existed, the fate of universities is tied in important ways to creating a better world or losing the concept of a world for which we all hope. So it was about 500 years ago that this university and its extraordinary Thomistic theology department, led by Francisco Di Vittorio, for whom the library here is named, provided the foundation for the Council of Trent. And therefore, it's probably a fitting time for us to think about universities in the context of human progress on all levels, spiritual as well as material. The great theologian Karl Jaspers spoke about the axial age, the age roughly a millennium in which humankind pivoted to the concept of humans as individuals from kind of tribal identity and collective responsibility. There are those, I among them, who come from theology, my first discipline, my first doctorate, who think that we are perhaps now in a second axial age, a second age of extraordinary inflection. What's undeniable is that the world is miniaturizing in every way. Think of that word, miniaturizing, because distances of space and of time are shrinking out of existence. It's conceivable for me, for example, to teach a course in person in Abu Dhabi that meets every 2 weeks, even as I live in New York. And I can leave New York on a Friday night and be in my classroom on Sunday morning and be back in my office in New York on Monday morning. The world is miniaturizing. We all are interconnected in ways that go beyond a simple and simple-minded understanding of globalization as merely an economic phenomena. We are deeply interconnected at every level. There is a way in which the phrase "no person is an island" is truer today than it has ever been. Things that happen anywhere in the world have an impact throughout the world. They have an impact on people who don't know an outside world exists, like the community in Papua New Guinea, with which I spent 10 days last year, but which is affected by the collapse of the ozone layer in the same way that the Great Barrier Reef near to them is. They don't know of the outside world. They don't know of the concept of a university, but they are affected by the behavior of those of us who seem to be distant from them but are not. So in every way, the world is miniaturizing, and we human beings are reacting to it, of course, across a spectrum, but I'll be binary for the sake of brevity. You can see two broad reactions that are pervasive throughout the world, certainly in my country. There are those who react to the inevitable presence of the other in their lives with fear, with nativism, with what I'll call gating strategies, whether they be putting walls up around countries or walls up around neighborhoods, gating strategies, a desire essentially to hunker down and be with our own, people like us. And then there's a different reaction. There's a reaction by those who delight in the wonder of difference, of the joy of coming to know the unknown, of the embrace of connection. In my own life, as I said, my first doctorate is in religion. I've seen a remarkable arc, almost two parallel arcs in two different directions over the last 60 years. Literally 60 years ago, I sat in a high school classroom where a progressive man, a man who would go on in the 60s to lead the peace movement, a man by the name of Daniel Berrigan, for those of you that know American politics and history, wrote on the blackboard in that classroom the words, extra ecclesia nulla salus. Outside the church, there's no salvation. And I went up to him after class and I said, Father Berrigan, does that mean that my closest friend, Jerry Epstein, a Jew, can't go to heaven? And this progressive man 60 years ago said to me, John, if you don't baptize him, he will not go to heaven. Now, my wife, Lisa, my late wife, Lisa, the most remarkable human being that I ever saw walk this earth, was Jewish. And I guarantee you she has a higher place in whatever heaven is than I will have, baptized or not. And 60 years after Daniel Berrigan made that statement, I could find myself in the Vatican with representatives of 25 other faith traditions, including atheism as a faith, having an ecumenical conversation. The Second Vatican Council had moved us from theological dogmatism to theological ecumenism, as we called it in the 60s, as we began to be taught this vocabulary by the great John the 23rd. So that's one 60-year arc, from a classroom in 1958 to a classroom in 2018. Meanwhile, back in Brooklyn in 1958, my father was the political boss of the borough. He ran the Jefferson Democratic Club, named for Thomas Jefferson, the first Democrat. And he worked across party lines to get things done. And 60 years later, I'll speak for my country only, but you'll see if it's applicable to yours, there has developed what might be called a secular dogmatism that is more virulent, more revealed to the believer than was the virgin birth in 1956. Our politics has become extra ecclesia nulla salus. Outside my political faith, there is no salvation. And how did they, the other, ever get to be that way? As our societies in our political conversation have developed what I call an allergy to nuance and complexity, just as the world is becoming more complex. So here we are at this inflection moment. Perhaps there is before us a second axial age, perhaps over the last 100 years as the world has miniatured, if you believe people in the tradition of Karl Jaspers, like the Jesuit theologian Teilhard de Chardin, there is a spiritual convergence occurring. Could there be a kind of secular ecumenism, such that the world could develop into an interlocking community of communities? I submit to you that the enterprise of universities is about answering that question in the affirmative. Universities have always been on the side of understanding, which is another way of saying of knowing the unknown, which is another way of saying being ecumenical. This is our big mission. We always have operated beyond sovereignty. The world of ideas has no border and is anything but a zero-sum game. It's a positive-sum game. So individual universities accepting this reality have begun to think beyond sovereignty in the best tradition of the Bolognas and the Salamancas, who always thought and had their thinking brought beyond sovereignty. So some universities, mine among them, have very self-consciously adapted their structure and form to create a more global presence. Don't conceive necessarily of this global presence as being a set of branch campuses. Think of it instead as an organic circulatory system, much as ideas circulate among humanity, and wanting to have a real presence in each of the nodes of activities. And universities, understanding that knowledge is a positive-sum game, have developed interconnectivity among different consortia. The Magna Charta being just one example of that, but an important and vibrant connection. But even as they connect, universities have to constantly reflect on the core value that make each of the constituent elements, each university, an appropriate manifestation of the genus of what a university is. And at the essence of all of our core values, even at the essence of the living values as they evolve, you will find, I think, a spirit of skepticism, where no orthodoxy is permanently entrenched. No idea is above reproach. Probably the most formative part of my own intellectual development was participating in competitive debate. I began this in high school and spent 18 years in these vineyards, first as a participant, then later as a teacher of debate to young high school students. And I look back upon those years in competitive debate, and it's quite remarkable to see the structure of the way competitive debate operated, at least when I participated in it. Think of this just for a moment as an example, an exemplar of what universities could be. There was a single topic for the entire year. So let's say the topic is resolved that the United Nations should be significantly strengthened. And week in and week out, bright young people would come together to debate any variation of that topic on the affirmative and the negative sides, not knowing until just before they walked into the room which side of the debate they would be advocating. So it was inherently important to understand the best arguments on both sides. And the skill that made a champion debater more than any other was the ability to listen. And then after listening and understanding the opponent's argument in its strongest form, how then to articulate a precise answer to that at the first level. But then the debate went on through 4 iterations on each side, so that by the time the debate ended, if you had not extended your arguments, if all you had done in the second time you got up to speak was repeat what you said the first time, you would lose, because you had to listen and encounter with the argument. That, in a nutshell, in a little sideway of high school education, is paradigmatically what universities do. And we do it over centuries. And we develop minds and thoughts as we do it. Now, that has to be at the core of what we do. And if it is at the core of what we do, then we universities can begin to model for our societies an antidote to the secular dogmatism and the allergy to nuance and complexity that is beginning to permeate societies around the world. And if you say it's impossible, the headwinds are too strong, that what's going to happen is that secular dogmatism and allergy to complexity will prevail, then universities cease to be. So this is a version of Pascal's wager. We have to engage in the fight, or the fight will be lost. Now, some universities, my own among them, will take an additional step, and this is where I'll close. Some universities, and they will be across a spectrum, some universities will say, we want to go farther. We want not only to be an antidote to the secular dogmatism that's pervasive, but we want to be an affirmative incubator of ecumenical thinking. Now, those universities will choose to do the kind of thing that NYU has done with its campus in NYU Abu Dhabi. So if you don't know about this, go on the website and look at it, because I can tell you, against all of the headwinds, with the right partners, it can be done. So now there are 1,500 undergraduates there, 1,500 undergraduates who come from 124 different countries. And they come from the countries. They're not in the region as the children of expatriates. They come from the countries, and they are the best in their class. And they are turning down the best universities in the world to be at NYU Abu Dhabi. And why? Because these young people want to be in the community that is represented when you have 1,500 people from 124 different countries, and the largest national contingent is only 15% of the student body, and that national contingent, which is the American contingent, doesn't come from the host country. Think about that as an ecumenical experiment. And they leave loving each other and loving the concept of an ecumenical world. But please, please, and this is my final thought, even if you go to the ecumenical agenda as you advance with your university and attempt to handle this inflection point and answer affirmatively the call to a higher plane for humanity, a community of communities where difference is embraced and celebrated, please do not make such an education the exclusive property of the elites. This is the great challenge. So even as I work with NYU Abu Dhabi, I am chairman of the board of the University of the People, which is free and available to any child anywhere in the world who has access to the internet and is fluent in English and has no other option. So 18,000 students are studying, 12 of them studying for final exams in Aleppo while the bombing was going on, 600 of them in Syrian refugee camps in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, children in the hills of Afghanistan. But most importantly, and this is the link, we who run the University of the People, and here I make an offer to you, and I ask you to accept in the spirit of what I've said. We do not care if they graduate from the University of the People. We want to give them an opportunity to attend your schools. So every year at the end of freshman year, the top 10 students in the University of the People are enrolled in NYU Abu Dhabi. So we have a woman that graduated last year, magna cum laude, whom we found in the hills of Afghanistan. We have a young man that graduated last year with honors, who we found in the hills of Haiti, another from sub-Saharan Africa. We have these students for you that have proven themselves in this online university in the first year, and we want to give them to you. What you have to do is understand they can't afford a cup of coffee. So you've got to support them. And if we do that, if we give them ladders up, 25 years from now, we will find that we, the universities in this room and those committed to them, this great instrument, which has come down over these centuries, will have done a lot to create the ecumenical world of which Teilhard de Chardin dreamed and of which we should all dream. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, John. It is so appropriate that you mentioned the sacred and the secular, as you will see tomorrow when we celebrate with our walk through the town. Also appropriate that you should mention ecumenical approaches, and particularly extending to the Middle East and other growth areas. Our second keynote is given by Pilar Aranda, who has already been introduced. She is Vice President of the Spanish Rectors Conference and a Professor of Physiology at the University of Granada. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, may I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts on the changing role of the university in today's complex global society. It is an honor for me as rector of the University of Granada to do so. I will develop my talk around the concept of the citizen university, drawing in part to Granada. But it is very important not only in the city of Granada, but only to the province. It's a province little also, without enterprise. For example, we work with the enterprise of industry, another province of the Madrid, Barcelona, because in Granada they are not enterprise. I think this different model because Milano is a region very many develop of the industry.
So I love Milano. I take my grandchildren to the opera in the Colosseum in Verona each summer, and we spend time in Milano. So first, I think it's important that people debate whether or not they accept my base premise, which is that this second axial age and this ecumenical mission is a mission that universities should embrace. If you're past that with me, then the challenges that you raise are practical challenges to trying to move toward that goal. And there are economic and there are social challenges, and both are very real. The economic is easier to deal with in a way because it becomes self-evident. So let me just give one concrete story with which you can leave. So a young man named Musba, who homeschooled himself in an Ethiopian tribal village through the 8th grade, walks 5 days to Addis Ababa, says to the international school there, you give me any exam you want as an entrance exam. He takes the exam, he gets the highest grades of any student that had taken it in that cycle. They admit him. Not surprisingly, he's the valedictorian upon graduation, but still essentially unaware and unable to take advantage of the universities in this room. We found him through the scouting that we do for NYU Abu Dhabi. We have about 1,000 scouts out in the world looking for those that would be missed by the system. And he comes in and graduates from our place, magna cum laude, goes back and has set up a school in the tribal village from which he came. Now, if you have to justify the expenditure because he can't afford anything, you just imagine his effect on the students around him in the classroom, both by the perspective that he brings, but also by the seriousness about his studies that he brings. You have a child of privilege sitting next to him who might be lackadaisical about his or her studies. And Musba, who has worked every inch of his way to an education, says, get with it. When you come to class unprepared, it diminishes the quality of my class. Okay, so you can make a utilitarian argument that you're opening up a world that justifies the diversion. We all have resources, and we make trade-offs in every budget we make. And there isn't the university that's a signatory that can't find 10 spots for full room board tuition scholarships for people that are discovered in ways that I've said, or through the University of the People. Now, the social barriers are greater, in my view, because then you come into the headwinds of the societies in which we live, where there are those that would hunker down behind those gates and who recoil at the word globalization because of some of the really deleterious effects of economic globalization and the fact that the positive sides of globalization don't have a face, like Musba's face. And those are headwinds that are there, and they're going to cause criticism of anybody, any leader of a university. Believe me, I lived this. So for 2 years, there was a relatively small group of our faculty with a cooperating reporter at the New York Times who ultimately got fired because the stories were inaccurate. But it was 2 years of hell for me and my family. Okay, so you have to be ready to take the headwinds. But ladies and gentlemen, if we don't take the headwinds, this is what I say, it's Pascal's wager. You're betting against yourself and it won't happen. So if you don't have the resources to have scouts out there, I'm saying to you, we will provide you free the assets of the University of the People. We've got 18,000 students out there, some of whom would be very eager to come to your universities, and we've shown their academic capacity to do it. You just provide the economics, and then we'll take on the social resistance together. Thank you.
What a note to finish on. May I thank John and Pilar, our speakers. Thank you for your questions. We will now break for coffee, which is in the cloisters. And could you please be back in here, ready to start at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.
So I will be in Egypt, I think, the week of December 13th for this 4 days for the State Department, working with
USA?
Yes. Okay, so, and I've given him a bracket of days I can be there from the 13th to the 20th or something like that. If there's something useful I can do for you in Cairo, I'm going in and out by way of Cairo. So I'll fly to Dubai.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, may I just interrupt your exit, because I gather that some rector colleagues now have to leave. We have a situation where tomorrow morning you have to be seated in here by 8:30. The security operation tomorrow morning opens at 7:45, and at 8:30 the doors will be bolted, and if you're not in, you will not be able to get in. Those who are signing the Magna Charta tomorrow, when you come in, can you go to the first floor where you will be given further instructions? Others, please come into this room. Thank you. Coffee now.
Okay. It's amazing how many people